Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the weekly show with Aditya, India's number one podcast, with India's number one host, Aditya, in association with Dusra.net, the number one website in sports, education, and entertainment. It was a deja vu of sorts as things came full circle for Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins at the Extreme Rules pay per view. In this case, the roles were reversed. If in 2015 it was Seth Rollins who cashed in his Money in the Bank contract to win the WWE title, 4 years later, roles were reversed. This time, the Universal Championship at stake. Rollins, after surviving a rather controversial Extreme Rules winner take all match, Lesnar, who had been threatening to cash in, took advantage of this situation, and all it needed was two German suplexes and one F5 to retain his title. This celebration did not end there, as the WWE management allowed 10 wrestlers to have a shot at the title by having a over the top battle royal match, and once again Seth Rollins managed to do what he did at the Royal Rumble by winning this particular elimination encounter to decide the number one contender for the Universal Championship. So for the upteenth time, he faces Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship at the SummerSlam pay-per-view event. Titles change hand frequently or after a gap of couple of months, and though it is between the same wrestlers all the time, and we have an affinity towards individuals who have been there for decades versus those who have just started to make their name in this particular profession and industry. Just like any other sport, professional or amateur, we have this comparison between the old guard and the new faces. For most, there would be no comparison when it comes to talking about a Triple H or a Roman Reigns. Ask anyone who has watched this sport even for, let's say, a week or a month, and the first name that comes out of their mind will be by default Triple H, Kurt Angle, The Rock, a Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, a John Cena. And though these individuals are now more in the semi-retired phase or are making sporadic appearances, they still evoke the emotions whenever they are present on the stage. How do you compare someone who made his debut in 1992 to someone who made their debut in 2012, for example? But this is human nature and our cling on attitude. And this is a common feature in all domains. This particular pay-per-view event saw new champions and a few champions retain their title. Shinsuke Nakamura and AJ Styles, who had an intense battle last year for 4 months, have now been compensated by the virtue of these two individuals winning other titles. While AJ Styles defeated Ricochet for the United States Championship, Nakamura defeated Finn Balor for the Intercontinental Championship. And it looks like for a while these two might not push for a shot at the world titles in the WWE Championship and the Universal Championship. The members of the New Day group created a record of sorts as they claimed the tag team and reclaimed the WWE title, though the pool of challengers for the same is now growing. One of the most awaited and fascinating tag team match at the Extreme Rule pay-per-view, which had everyone on their toes, went as per a script. One could say that Roman Reigns' stocks and legend would have risen by teaming with someone who has been in this particular industry for over 3 decades. And despite WWE being a private entity and having nothing to do with any international events, despite its own wrestlers being former Olympians and footballers. But let's take an example to understand. The emotion Undertaker evokes in certain individual or individuals or a group or a community is the same which a Sachin Tendulkar has evoked, or a Vishwanathan Anand, or recently a MS Dhoni, Serena Williams, Roger Federer, and his contemporaries. It would be crude to compare all these individuals or these individuals in one group and WWE in another, considering that WWE tries to balance between entertainment and being goofy as compared to other sports whose criteria and the way they have been viewed is at a more serious level. And the fact that we take WWE as a TV show, something that is fictional, scripted, and meant for entertainment as compared to the excitement of other sports which are happening at an impromptu level and have more serious implication. So we are going to have a twofold approach, and despite all these discussion, this particular industry has given me a few tips on certain things, and I shall keep the same to myself. If we go at the micro level, it is nothing more than a performance on the stage with subtle differences, and by dedicating one episode for this particular genre, I have become the only Indian to have any kind of analysis and expertise on this particular show. And while it may not seem prudent at this time, maybe a decade later one will have a different perspective as to why have I dedicated a special episode for this. As we say in sports, a few things are uncontrollable. When the time is right, things will pick up speed. Thank you for listening to part 1 of this episode. Stay tuned for part 2 in a short while. My book, The Fifth Empire, is available on Amazon in ebook and paperback format. If you are intrigued by the name, so what are you waiting for? Rush to amazon.com and purchase a copy, a hard copy or a paperback version now. Welcome to part 2 of this episode. The debate around MS Dhoni's contribution to the team continues. But this debate is dictated not by logic but by the sentiments of the individuals and the pressure by the various media. And what are we hinging our debate on? An almost preposterous topic: strike rates and the age factor. Age in sports is a very tricky topic. Cross 30 and suddenly you are deemed old, slow, and not good enough to be part of a team. In an environment where one is obsessed by the term youth and the fact that we have put a certain age group to it, that is 19 to 25, you cross that age and now you are in an awkward zone. The debate around Dhoni is interesting in a lot of ways. He is among the 4 current wicket keepers for whom I have any respect. If you go into the historical records, before Dravid and Dhoni, wicket keepers were always part-time and they had no contribution to the game in any manner. Wicket keepers in Indian teams had always been invisible till Dravid arrived and Dhoni took it to a level which cannot be matched. Or so is the thought process right now. You ask anyone on the streets, an individual of any age, be it 100 or 20 years old, and ask them, name one Indian wicketkeeper, and the first name that comes out is Dhoni. And if and when he does retire, the impact of the same will be much bigger than the impact of a Tendulkar retiring. If succession planning is how the selectors and the management is going ahead, and they want to have someone as good as Dhoni replacing him, one does not need to look beyond a Rishabh Pant. And if I ask you, what role did the chief selector play when he had his moment in the sun, I'm sure 75% of my listeners would not even know who are the selectors and whether they did play for the Indian team internationally. But yes, it is quite a shock that they managed to play 5 or 6 matches, and the chief selector was a former wicket keeper, but he was a part-timer as any other keeper who were his contemporaries. One never talks about the goalkeeper in football and hockey. Why? Because the goalkeeper, like his teammates, also has a substitute, and they keep on switching positions as and when the coach requires to do the same. But unfortunately, in cricket, substitutes are passive participants, and unless there is a major injury, wicket keepers are not substituted at one's whims and fancy. Therefore, critics and fans alike, the idea of Dhoni will never dissipate. One isn't nervous, emotional, or excited about exam results as one is on the day he announces his retirement, because the biggest relief will be for the selectors, as they would avoid those nightmarish questions about his position in the team. So this cult that we have created, the human tendency to make immortal out of mortals, will continue. Will we adapt to a Rishabh Pant the way we have adapted to a Virat Kohli after Tendulkar's retirement? Kohli also did take time, as he almost took 4 years to get going. So if the selectors, the team management, and the passive stakeholders were patient enough for Virat Kohli to develop his own style and legacy, we have to show the same kind of patience towards Rishabh Pant and stop this comparison between him and Dhoni. When Dhoni started, he had no one we could compare him to. Remember, I talked about part-time keepers. While Dravid was a good keeper, but he was part-time, and Partha Patel and Dinesh Karthik could never live up to the opportunities they got. So yes, Dhoni was the first full-time legitimate Indian keeper, and for me he towers above the likes of Kiran More, Sayyid Karmani, or anyone in the medieval times. Do read my book, as I have a chapter on the role of coach in cricket, and despite all our love and hatred for Ravi Shastri because of the way he speaks, where he vehemently defends the performances of his team despite the result, and with Dravid being the head of NCA and the board not in the mood to recruit any foreign coach, Ravi Shastri remains the best coach by default, even if sadly it is the commentary box's loss. And if we have to look at other names, despite their experience, Tendulkar, Lakshman, Ganguly did their part as players. There would be an ego clash as far as the captain and the coach is concerned. And if we were eager for a spin bowling coach, then I would have Harbhajan Singh. Especially if you look at the spin bowling coach the other teams have. If I was part of the recruitment committee, I would just reinstate Ravi Shastri, Sanjay Bangar, and Bharat Arun without even asking any question, because results notwithstanding, they have done a stupendous job over the past 3 years. And if we are looking at a foreign coach, I have also written a similar article on this. You can go to my website and have a look. So if we were to look for a foreign coach, the best available option is Stephen Fleming from New Zealand or Daniel Vittori, as Daniel Vittori has been the coach of the Bangalore T20 team. The criteria put by the Indian Cricket Board is 30 tests and 51 days. Well, we do not have enough options in that category, as Ganguly, Tendulkar and Lakshman would not be the appropriate choice, as these three as broadcasters have been negative towards the performances of the Indian team and would lack the empathy to do the job required. What about the performance of the Indian football team in their final match of the Intercontinental Cup? Yes, they missed the road for the finals. Despite that, they performed to perfection. They will have to work on not conceding goals in the second half after being in a strong position in the first half. And like Dhoni, their captain Sunil Chhetri finds himself on the wrong side of 30 at the age of 34. They drew against Syria 1-all, and this time the equalizer was in the form of a penalty stroke after conceding a foul in their D. We have some great emerging players in the Indian football team, and if the forwards, the defenders and the midfielders can work on their game, they deserve to earn a space on the first page of the sports section and even the first page of the newspaper. And for this, the media will have to shed its ego and give space of the first column of the sports section apart from cricket, the likes of Hima Das, PV Sindhu, Saina Nehwal, who still have a year to prove their worth in the 2020 Olympics, and give that page, that column, that paragraph to the Indian football and the Indian hockey team without fail, even if it is not on popular demand, but based on logic and common sense. Rankings or not, this Indian team is good enough to play in the World Cup main draw. There is no need to give a reason why. They need to be there, they have to be there, they should be there. And how will this be achieved? Well, first we need to construct international standard football grounds, right from the car park to the audience engagement and the fan zone. And our own domestic tournament has to be so good that the winner of that particular championship can play in the Champions League. And once that happens, there is no looking back. And the only hurdles will be, well, I leave the answer to my audience. What do you think the hurdles are going to be for an Indian domestic football team from the football competition, the ISL and the I-League, which for me is at the level of La Liga, the EPL and others? And why should not one of these teams play in the Champions League and compete with a Barcelona, a Real Madrid and all the other domestic teams? So send me an email if you think this is a possibility, or if you think this is like building castles in the air. Then let me know, why do we think that our teams do not deserve a spot? This was episode 88 on the 17th of July 2019. Thank you for listening to this special 2-part episode. Stay tuned to this network. I will be back next week at the same time on the same channel. So if you want to be a part of my show, please send your valuable suggestions and send your recording on topics ranging from sports, education, and entertainment. On the email ID Aditya the writer at gmail.com. That is Aditya the writer at gmail.com. Thank you for listening to this episode. Please like and subscribe to my Facebook page and YouTube channel and stay tuned for the next episode.